There are moments when a single, short statement is enough to shake the entire royal family. This time, the focus is on Princess and, known for her outspokenness and rare public pronouncements. When she reportedly confirmed the existence of the so-called Saudi Arabia papers, the atmosphere instantly changed. What was once considered a rumor, speculation, or conspiracy theory suddenly took on a completely different meaning. Prince Harry's reaction was described as extremely intense, suggesting that this story is far from simple. So what exactly are these Saudi Arabia papers? Why are they causing such tension within the royal family? And what is going on behind the closed doors of the palace? Let's dissect each controversial detail in this story that is causing a public uproar. If you're interested in the latest developments and previously undisclosed aspects of the British royal family, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates. I thought he would change. I truly believed he would find his own path of service, and that path would never fade. This sentiment, according to those familiar with the inner workings, is not unique to one individual, but reflects the shared mood of many members of the royal family. It emerges against the backdrop of an ancient principle that once served as a solid shield for the monarchy, facing an unprecedented challenge. For generations, the British royal family has survived and weathered storms thanks to an unwritten rule: no complaining, no explaining. That absolute silence was once a strength. But when that very silence begins to crack from within, its consequences become more unpredictable than ever. According to sources close to Buckingham Palace, after a series of images that caused an international uproar were circulated, Princess Anne is believed to have expressed her views in a very discreet manner. She did not appear before the press, nor did she issue an official statement, but spoke only to those closest to her. The message conveyed was described as brief, cold, but heavy. The file existed, and there had been serious warnings. It was this decisiveness, according to accounts, that devastated Prince Harry. If this reflects the truth, then his perspective on marriage, family, and what he believed to be betrayal may have been fundamentally overturned. This story is now seen by many in royal circles as one of the most serious failures of internal judgment in modern times. Discussions are not aimed at judging right or wrong, but rather at a larger question. Did Princess Anne foresee a danger that others underestimated? And did she try to intervene when she still had the opportunity? According to sources, the following details require careful attention, as they contradict the familiar image, even completely contradicting the narrative that the mainstream media has long presented. To better understand this, many believe it's necessary to go back to the early stages of the relationship, when Prince Harry was described as being deeply in love. Royal protocol activated security and vetting procedures, including a high-level background check. In most cases, this is merely a formality, focusing on obvious risks such as finances, scandals, or sensitive relationships. However, according to insiders, in this case, some unusual signs emerged that prompted security and analytical departments to pay more attention than usual. Initial reports, as described, highlighted inconsistencies that were difficult to explain. During that period, the public image was that of an actress struggling to find her place in the entertainment industry, with modest income and unremarkable roles. It was a familiar story to the public, a journey of overcoming hardship to rise to the top. However, in the internal discussions mentioned, surveillance data and collected information painted a different, more complex and multi-layered picture. According to these reports, there were appearances at luxurious venues, private gatherings reserved only for the super-rich and influential figures. No official conclusions were ever released, nor were any public accusations made. Yet, the discrepancy between the public image and what was recorded internally led some within the system to question. And it is precisely these unanswered questions that continue to fuel controversy, division, and leave many unanswered questions unsolved today. Princess Anne has long been known as one of the most outspoken and disciplined figures in the British royal family. She dislikes beating around the bush, is not easily swayed by emotions, and has particularly close ties to security agencies and behind-the-scenes power structures. According to several close sources, She was one of the first senior members to access that sensitive dossier. And what unfolded before her eyes was not a simple romantic tale. She read every page meticulously, cross-referencing timelines, examining the flow of money and travel schedules, and then settled on a core question that, according to accounts, Harry never wanted to ask himself. Who was behind all this? Because there is an undeniable reality. An actress struggling to find her place in the entertainment industry cannot naturally appear regularly in closed international power circles without significant financial support. Expensive trips, private events, and gatherings reserved for the ultra-rich and influential are not simply doors that open by luck. Someone arranged the travel. Someone facilitated access. Someone secured presence in places where decisions with the potential to impact the entire nation are made behind closed doors. According to sources, the information in the files is enough to shake the image Harry has held for years. Contrary to the public narrative of a difficult period, the internal data reveals a different picture, more stable, more secure, and protected by resources not typically found in financial records. In the world of intelligence and security, access from unknown sources is always a warning sign for analysts. For Princess Anne, this wasn't a disjointed sequence of events. In her eyes, it was an orderly structure, consistently maintained over time. Lavish parties were no longer seen as insignificant social invitations. When an individual consistently appeared in the same high society circles for years, while lacking the financial means to sustain such a lifestyle, analysts began connecting the dots. They traced trips, compared images, contrasted schedules, and identified recurring intersections. Gradually, a pattern emerged, spanning across regions from North America to Europe, from the Mediterranean to the Middle East, with funding sources not publicly disclosed. According to accounts, these findings led to a tense confrontation, believed to have fractured the relationship between the aunt and nephew. Harry later perceived the exchange as a display of coldness and a lack of understanding. But from Princess Anne's perspective, it was a final, frank, and unembellished attempt to warn and protect. Putting themselves in her shoes, many would agree that the situation presented almost no easy choice. On one side was a confidential report with serious assessments. On the other was her grandson, deeply in love and preparing for a wedding watched by the world. According to sources, the conversation didn't revolve around royal protocol, background, or social prejudices. The focus was on security and potential risks. She is said to have introduced a familiar concept in power analysis circles, often referred to as strategic social placement. This isn't espionage in the traditional sense, but rather the art of placing the right people in the right spaces. Individuals with attractive appearances, strong communication skills, and high social acumen are sometimes guided, step by step, into strategically valuable circles. You are invited to the right events, meet the right people, and gradually become familiar with the environment where power operates. According to the prevailing interpretation, the images in the records do not show randomness. They reflect a sense of comfort, adaptability, and a keen understanding of the unspoken order within influential spaces. For Princess Anne, this is a sign of a deliberately nurtured process, not the result of chance. That warning, according to those who heard it, was chillingly cold, enough to send shivers down one's spine. Not because of the harsh tone, but because of its emotionless clarity. The message was simple. This wasn't just a romantic relationship. There was backing, there was provision, and within those closed circles of power, no one was held in simply for harmless presence. Everyone had to contribute something. But Harry, believing he was living in a fated story, refused to look directly at the signs before him. In his eyes, she was a victim of the media, an unjustly treated person, a symbol of an underground system he believed was manipulating public opinion. His famous quote, "Meghan gets what she wants," reflected his perspective, a battle between love and opposing forces. The document, therefore, was not seen by him as a shield, but as an insult, a testament to prejudice and an attempt to destroy personal happiness. And so he set it aside. The data was ignored. The questions were not asked further. He moved on, believing he was protecting love, while others believed he was walking straight into what had been foreseen. What makes this story tragic is not the confrontation, but the motives behind it. Princess, and, according to sources, did not act out of personal animosity or prejudice. She acted as someone who had spent more than half a century within the royal system, witnessing too many instances of self-serving approaches. She understood how relationships could be exploited, how royal prestige could be used as financial or political leverage. Over time, she developed a keen instinct for the discrepancies between image and reality. And that instinct, according to the account, was triggered by a series of details: a lifestyle far exceeding publicly disclosed income, sensitive international connections, a subtly constructed but unexplained social standing. In that view, it doesn't resemble a pure, innocent love story driven by pure emotion. It's more like a long-term, consistently maintained process, with benefits and arrangements that outsiders wouldn't easily recognize. The question isn't who's right or wrong, but whether that frankness is cruel or simply accurate. To understand why these doubts exist, many argue that one needs to look at the unmistakable element: money. In the years before becoming the center of global attention, her publicly available career records show Meghan Markle primarily taking on small roles, making brief television appearances, and working in unstable jobs. She wasn't a box office star, nor did she have the star status to guarantee high earnings. The most talked about job during that period was appearing as a model carrying briefcases on a television show, reportedly for a modest fee. Contrasting with that image, later circulating photos and accounts painted a completely different picture: luxurious yacht vacations, private gatherings at extravagant European destinations, and events exclusively for the super-rich and internationally influential. These were venues where the cost of a single evening could far exceed the monthly living expenses of an actor seeking opportunities in Hollywood. This contrast, according to analysts, doesn't draw any conclusions, but rather poses a simple question: was publicly disclosed income sufficient to sustain such a lifestyle? It was this inexplicable disparity that led many within the security system to question the situation. It's not about personal judgment, but because in their world, financial gaps and unexplained access to resources are always seen as signals that need clarification. And from those questions that have never been publicly answered, the debate continues to this day without a resolution. An actor struggling to make ends meet, no matter how hard they try, can hardly afford the costs of an extravagant, international lifestyle. Therefore, the specific figures become crucial, making this case difficult to refute. Around 2010, a first-class flight from Los Angeles to Monaco cost thousands of dollars, not including additional fees. Staying in Monaco during peak seasons like the Grand Prix or yacht shows meant even the minimum hotel price was very high, often increasing many times over. Add to that designer evening gowns suitable for high society events, and the cost could reach tens of thousands of dollars per appearance. Hair, makeup, accessories, and other services further drive up the price. In total, a week in these settings could cost an amount that many people would have to work for a whole year to earn. What caught the analyst's attention wasn't a single trip, but the repetition of that pattern over many years in many different locations. From this perspective, it was clear someone was paying for, arranging, and facilitating that presence. And in the logic of the powerful, generosity is rarely unconditional. As Princess Anne is said to have said, power is never given without expectations. From that point on, the story was viewed not only through an emotional lens, but began to take on the color of sophisticated social transactions. In the world of international tycoons and the Gulf elite, every relationship operates according to an unspoken pattern. Access becomes a form of currency. Image and personal charisma are leverage. Discretion is a prerequisite. Internal assessments, according to accounts, did not consider these to be mere random invitations or fleeting luck. The series of images spanning many years is seen as a sign of systematic support, not help, but investment. Financial analysis, in this context, becomes a crucial tool. The absence of corresponding large expenditures in bank records or credit card statements is interpreted in a very specific way. Someone else has stepped in to pay. Someone else has made the reservations, arranged logistics, and ensured everything runs smoothly. In intelligence terms, This is called being taken care of. When an individual cannot afford such a lifestyle but maintains it consistently, it indicates the involvement of an external source. In return, the person being supported brings values that the sponsor values: timely presence, the ability to keep information confidential, and appearing with the right faces in the right spaces. It was at this point, according to the account, that Princess posed a question Harry could not answer satisfactorily. What was the return on that investment? Who was behind the entire arrangement? And if the yachts were the stage, who was the orchestrator? The name frequently mentioned was Marcus Anderson. In the public eye, he was simply portrayed as a close friend, a lifestyle advisor associated with Soho House. But in the palace's private assessments, that image was different. He was seen not just as a companion, but as a figure navigating relationships. The reason British intelligence took notice of him lay in the special role of Soho House, a network of private clubs where celebrities, investors, and influential figures regularly interacted. The core value here was not just hospitality, but the ability to connect. Who met whom, when, and in what context? All of these could have far-reaching consequences. And according to sources, a pivotal event occurred before her relationship with Harry began: the grand opening of Soho House in Istanbul. Istanbul was no random choice. The city sits at the crossroads of East and West, where European sophistication meets Middle Eastern capital, where relationships are formed informally and rarely leave a written record. Analysts believe it is at such intersections that the most significant deals often begin, quietly, discreetly, and out of public view. According to sources familiar with the matter, the event was not simply a lavish social gathering. It was described as a closed marketplace, a meticulously designed space where ambition met resources, where promising individuals were targeted by wealthy patrons who held the power to open doors inaccessible to the average person. Documents cited in internal communications allegedly indicate that Meghan was introduced to a specific group of Middle Eastern financiers and influential figures in the Gulf region. And this network, according to analysts, later surfaced indirectly in images from the yacht and other upscale settings. What makes the connection to Istanbul particularly sensitive is the timing. This event took place in 2015, shortly before she reportedly met Prince Harry. To those watching closely, it was seen as the culmination of years of cultivating relationships within the elite circles. By then, she was no longer an outsider. She was familiar with the unspoken rules, understood the expectations, and knew how these kinds of relationships worked. Istanbul was seen as a turning point, a subtle signal that she was ready to move on to a new phase, someone she could trust to appear in more sensitive relationships and handle them without causing disruption. From here, the story became more complicated. The public learned that Harry and Meghan met on a discreet date in London, arranged by a mutual acquaintance. The name of the person who facilitated the meeting, according to many reports, was Marcus Anderson. These pieces of information, when put together, created significant pressure on the palace. According to sources, the initial reaction within Buckingham Palace could be described as chaotic but still under control. A swift statement was issued to refute the alleged misrepresentations, emphasizing that the speculation was untrue and irresponsible. However, what was noteworthy was what was not done. There were no harsh threats of legal action, no heavy personal attacks. The language was chosen with utmost caution. To experienced observers, this usually indicates restraint. Princess is not a voice to be easily dismissed. She does not represent sensationalist media, nor is she a marginal figure. When statements of denial are written in a way that avoids absolute pronouncements, it often leaves room for multiple interpretations. Legally, the situation is considered particularly complex. If any insider information were shared or interpreted beyond the permitted scope, legal advisors would certainly have to carefully consider all the consequences. However, pursuing direct legal action against a senior member of the royal family is almost unthinkable, and this relative silence has only fueled speculation. Meghan's representatives reportedly reacted more aggressively in the media, describing the claims as entirely fabricated and personally motivated. Even so, the strategy focused on questioning the motives and interpretations, rather than refuting specific details. Another statement from the lawyers involved also drew attention for its wording. Calling a description misleading or quoted out of context usually implies that some event or exchange occurred, but the interpretation is deemed inaccurate. This, in the eyes of legal language analysts, is different from a complete denial. And it is at this point that Princess Anne's personal credibility becomes an unmissable factor. She served the monarchy for decades, undertaking a heavy workload and maintaining an image of discipline and integrity. For many, both within and outside the royal family, that was a reputation that could not be easily erased by a few statements. Behind the carefully crafted public statements, the internal reaction was reportedly far more tense and urgent. According to sources described as close to the center of power, the king quickly convened closed-door meetings with his most senior courtiers and closest legal advisors. The questions raised were not merely crisis management, but directly concerned the very existence and stability of the institution. What information did Princess Anne actually possess? To what extent and how accurate was it? Without a full assessment of the evidence she allegedly had access to, issuing an official response was considered too risky. In the context of social media and the relentless cycle of news, the palace's traditional message control strategies were believed to be losing their effectiveness. The story spread at a speed that the old processes could not keep up with. Advisors faced a difficult dilemma: how to control the situation when every move was under real-time scrutiny. Those involved issued their own denials, and legal teams were activated in parallel to prepare for every possible scenario. According to internal accounts, shortly after private exchanges at the highest level, the Royal Legal Council reportedly convened an emergency meeting to consider unprecedented options. The task was not simply to handle a personal relationship, but to review all the potential legal, ceremonial, and constitutional consequences. From titles, housing arrangements, access to resources associated with the monarchy, to public responsibility and the ripple effect on the image of the monarchy, everything had to be carefully examined. The terms being considered, according to sources, were highly technical and sensitive. Some options were described as allowing the retention of ceremonial titles, but with the added benefit of a complete separation from actual power and official privileges. Material and logistical support, tied to the public role, could be terminated according to a clear roadmap. This approach was seen as a gradual process of reduction rather than a sudden, shocking action. Historically, this situation was considered extremely rare. Advisors reportedly had to trace precedents from centuries ago, when laws regarding royal marriage and duties were formed in entirely different contexts. Simultaneously, a strict confidentiality clause was mentioned in the discussions, restricting the publication or participation in media projects related to the royal family without prior approval. For those closely observing, this was a sign of deep concern about the risk of information being exploited beyond control. While lawyers and advisors worked quietly behind closed doors, the public reaction was loud and intense. Historical comparisons quickly emerged, stirring up collective memories that had shaken the monarchy in the past. According to some sources, the desire at the highest levels was to bring the entire process to a close as soon as possible, before important foreign affairs began, to prevent personal controversies from further overshadowing the monarchy's image on the international stage. According to a close source, what is happening is not simply a legal move or procedural adjustment. It is described as the culmination of a simmering series of events spanning more than half a century, stemming from decisions made in silence. Essentially, the title is now seen as purely symbolic, no longer associated with real power or official influence. More importantly, privileges related to access to the revenue of the Duchy of Cornwall, the key source of royal income, are expected to be eliminated. Simultaneously, access to the Crown estate is restricted, meaning a significant reduction in the financial foundation that sustains the monarchy. According to circulating descriptions, the future residence will be set at Raymill House, a location with more personal significance than an official residence. The accompanying financial terms are said to be very strict, with penalties potentially reaching millions of pounds for violations. Some sources even suggest that Prince William himself requested the inclusion of this clause, taking a firm stance that there would be no more interpretation or manipulation of history to serve any narrative. Those familiar with the situation say that King Charles remained involved in the necessary legal discussions, but throughout the process, he faced a struggle between responsibility and personal feelings, leaving him more vulnerable than ever. This tense atmosphere reached its peak when a surprising statement was released. According to anonymous palace sources, the morning began quite normally until the information was disseminated through official channels. In an instant, aides realized this was no routine announcement. It wasn't from the press office, nor was it from a familiar spokesperson. The message was believed to have come directly from Prince William, and this detail alone was enough to change how the public perceived the entire affair. No roundabout language, no familiar formalities, just a short but decisive statement. In a move that stunned royal observers, the statement was understood to put an end to any possibility of future cooperation or connection between the royal family and the Duchess of Sussex. The language used left no room for reinterpretation, nor did it suggest any possibility of reconciliation. The door that many believed would always remain open, even if only nominally, seemed to have closed. Experts cautiously avoided speculating beyond the published content, but everyone recognized that the line had been clearly drawn, and its impact could be long-lasting. As the story continued to spread, attention shifted to the question of why the decision was made at this particular time. The public wanted to know how the preparation process unfolded, who was consulted, and whether everything had been planned in advance. Major news outlets, from British to international media, quickly jumped on board, continuously updating developments and analyzing the significance of the event. Many veteran journalists considered this a rare moment in the history of reporting on the monarchy. However, the most intense reaction came from social media, where in a short time, the topic generated enormous interaction and quickly became the focus of global discussion. But according to some observers, it wasn't just the content of the message that was noteworthy. It was the timing of the announcement, carefully calculated within the political, media, and public opinion context, that made everything special and left a lasting impact. Stay tuned, because we're about to uncover the full story behind this shocking decision. The timing of the announcement was strategically crucial. The information was released while morning programs in the UK were airing, coinciding with the working hours of Asian newsrooms and late-night news stations in North America. This arrangement virtually eliminated any lull. There was no waiting period, no time for the public to adjust. In just a few short minutes, the news spread globally, leaving many people stunned before they could even process it. Analysts later concluded that this wasn't an impulsive decision, but the result of careful planning. Economically, the reaction was relatively calm, but not entirely uneventful. The British pound saw no significant fluctuations, but some UK media-related stocks experienced a sudden surge in trading volume, reflecting the level of attention the announcement garnered. Public reaction worldwide was quite varied, except in the UK, where opinions quickly diverged. A quick survey conducted that day revealed a stark divide between age groups. This surprised many, as despite differing viewpoints, a majority felt that the relationship between the royal family and the Sussexes had reached a point of no return. Previously, the public was accustomed to interviews, documentaries, legal documents, and emotionally charged commentary, often appearing in rapid succession and reacting to events. But this time it was different. The announcement had an administrative, dry, and rigid tone, yet it came from a single individual. It's noteworthy that most of the subsequent questions went unanswered, not because of overwhelming pressure, but seemingly as a deliberate choice. That silence itself became a message. The agency had spoken, and the decision was seen as no longer open to debate. By midday, the focus of the discussion shifted from what happened to what will come next. Commentators began dissecting the potential implications for the royal family's long-term plans, from future ceremonial activities to charitable foundations and media strategy. Legal analysts focused on the consequences for titles, funding, and representative roles. Many older commentators expressed support, arguing that the decision was necessary to maintain institutional stability. Conversely, many younger commentators were dissatisfied with the decisiveness and lack of flexibility of the move. Another frequently mentioned factor was William's failure to speak directly in public. There were no emotional appeals, no mentions of personal grievances, and no revisiting of past controversies. Avoiding any personal elements made the announcement difficult to immediately challenge. The media had enough data to report on it, but lacked the detail to delve into the emotional aspect. This gap forced analysts to focus on structure, precedent, and consequences rather than on personality or personal motives. According to some royal historians, this decision wasn't entirely unprecedented. They cited past instances where titles were adjusted after major events. However, this argument was quickly countered. Even in sensitive times before, important messages were usually conveyed through government channels or collective mechanisms, not through such a clear personal statement. Many admitted they couldn't recall a time when someone considered the future king had directly endorsed such a decisive announcement. As the information spread, diplomatic agencies reportedly took the initiative to contact officials for more information, suggesting the event's impact extended far beyond the confines of the royal family. According to a well-informed source, Commonwealth offices received reports from Prince William's office, and by midday, the palace switchboard was overwhelmed with thousands of calls. Outside Kensington Palace, the press had gathered early. Some reporters said they had received unofficial signals that a major event was imminent, though no one could imagine the extent of its impact. A palace staff member described the atmosphere as a historic turning point, not only for the royal family, but also for British public life. William reportedly requested the activation of an internal response plan, the kind that requires years of preparation. A former palace aide confirmed that such scenarios are usually developed well in advance. What made this moment special was not the commotion, but the chilling sense of certainty that pervaded everything. A shocking piece of news, one that would be remembered for a long time in royal annals. It was not a day to celebrate or commemorate, but one many remember as the moment when Princess and supposedly made her definitive statement. The setting was carefully chosen, not Buckingham, not Windsor, but Gackham Park, her private residence, a rare space where she was not bound by protocol or institutional pressure. This was not seen as an official royal declaration, but rather a personal move, linked to media preparation and self-protection against a system that, in her perception, had deeply disappointed her. The immediate question was, what prompted and to take such a risky step? Why was she willing to risk decades of quiet service to bring this story to light? Before a carefully selected group of journalists, her face was described as tense, like that of someone who had kept a heavy secret for too long. Her usually calm hands trembled slightly as she held the prepared notes. When she spoke of discovering traces of communication, coded exchanges, call logs, and recorded meetings, which, she said, revealed disturbing connections between Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew. However, she stressed that what she knew went beyond mere family disagreements or personal conflicts. In her presentation, the core issue lay in the integrity of the institution and the belief in the crown. The atmosphere in the room was described as stunned. The notion of a lever capable of exerting pressure on the royal family sent shivers down many spines. Meghan, who joined the royal family and then withdrew to seek a more private life, and Andrew, who had left public duties, were believed to have had interactions that lasted far longer than the public had previously known. According to unconfirmed sources, these exchanges were not accidental, but took place over a long period, forming a discrete connection, maintained in silence and surrounded by suspicion. Although the allegations remain at the level of internal information, the story has been enough to shake public confidence and open a chapter of uncertainty for the British royal family. The interview involving Jeffrey Epstein had already caused a public uproar, but what shocked many even more was the appearance of two figures who seemed to have no common ground. According to Princess, they allegedly collaborated since late 2019, exchanging and sharing sensitive internal information. Her voice, usually known for its calmness and composure, this time carried a rare firmness, to the point that those present described it as pent-up anger. "I chose to remain silent," she said, "because I believe in institutions. I believe in family loyalty. And I believe that there are issues that should be resolved privately." Princess Anne is not one to seek attention. For decades, she has appeared to fulfill her duties, then quietly withdrawn from the spotlight. Therefore, her decision to face the media came as a shock to many. It wasn't a familiar move, nor was it an easy choice for her. But even more remarkable was that these statements were not, presumably, subject to any censorship by the palace communications department. This was Anne's direct voice, clearly aware of the potential consequences, and what she alluded to created a heavy atmosphere. One couldn't help but wonder, what could be serious enough to force someone like her to break her lifelong silence? Imagine Princess Anne standing before a relatively small, unpretentious, and undramatized group. Yet her message carried such weight that the room seemed to fall silent. In the way she presented it, what she discovered wasn't simply personal conflicts, but involved greater risks to the prestige and structure of the institution. Some observers believe that if this information is interpreted negatively, the legal and symbolic implications could be very complex. However, legal experts remain cautious, analyzing only what has been published, avoiding speculation beyond the facts. The line has been drawn, and if you find this analysis helpful, please subscribe to continue following the story's developments. Because, according to many, this is not the end. It's like the starting point for a larger series of questions. The question now is no longer whether the incident will soon be forgotten, but whether the institution is capable of overcoming the challenges that are gradually emerging. What do you think? Share your views in the comments. Many believe that the royal family is unlikely to continue operating as before. Either substantive reforms are needed to strengthen transparency and accountability, or the risk of losing public support will become increasingly apparent. Who was consulted? How long were these decisions considered? These questions are increasingly being raised. Attention is shifting to the motives behind William's actions and how a personal decision could have such a far-reaching impact on the entire structure. Princess Anne, a woman who never sought the spotlight, who had dedicated her life to quiet service, seems to have been pushed to an unavoidable moment. And while the story will be debated in many ways, one thing many agree on: after what has happened, the monarchy is unlikely to return to its former state. Thank you for watching the video until the end. If you found this content helpful or it gave you a new perspective, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to support us. Every interaction you give is a huge motivation for the channel to continue bringing you more in-depth, objective, and up-to-date analytical stories in the future. Please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. We always appreciate your feedback. See you in the next video.